Imagine getting your credit card declined not because you're broke or anything, but because some AI caught a fraudster trying to use it, like milliseconds before the transaction even went through. That's kind of the world we're diving into today, the world of AI-driven fraud prevention. We've got a whole bunch of research papers, industry blogs, even technical reports from companies that are like right there on the front lines. So by the end of this deep dive, you'll really get a good grasp of how AI is changing how we protect ourselves and our financial systems. First things first, like how big of a problem is financial fraud anyway? We're not talking about a few bucks here and there. The Nielsen report predicts that credit card fraud losses will hit something like $43 billion globally by 2026. That's huge. This impacts everybody: businesses, banks, individuals like you and me. The old ways of catching fraud are just not keeping up with all these new schemes. They're getting more and more complex, and that's where AI comes in. What makes it so powerful? Well, picture a detective that can analyze millions of transactions every second, spotting these tiny patterns that a human would never see. That's AI's superpower. You can go through massive amounts of data, making predictions and connections that are way beyond what we can do. So let's break down some of these AI heavy hitters. First up, machine learning. There are two main types: supervised and unsupervised learning. Supervised learning involves showing an AI a ton of examples of both legitimate and fraudulent transactions, so it learns to tell them apart, kind of like a sniffer dog trained to detect specific scents. Unsupervised learning is more like letting the AI loose in a sea of data. It's got to find the weird stuff, transactions that just don't fit the usual pattern, like trying to find a fake bill hidden in a stack of real ones. But wait, there's more. We've also got deep learning, which takes things to a whole other level. Deep learning uses artificial neural networks inspired by the human brain to analyze even more complex data relationships. For example, deep learning models can monitor credit card transactions live as they happen. If you usually buy groceries and gas with your card, but then suddenly there's an attempt to buy a super expensive gaming PC from another country, deep learning can flag that in milliseconds, potentially stopping that fraud before it even goes through. Those AI algorithms are also incredibly good at untangling complicated webs of transactions across tons of accounts and institutions for issues like money laundering. It's like following a trail of breadcrumbs, except these breadcrumbs are money transfers, and the AI is like a bloodhound sniffing out the launderers. And let's not forget about phishing attacks. Using natural language processing, AI can analyze emails and messages to flag anything that looks suspicious. So far, we've talked about how AI reacts to fraud, but what about stopping it before it happens? That's where predictive analytics comes in. AI can look at historical data and pinpoint what we call fraud hotspots, specific places, times, or types of transactions that are more likely to be targeted by fraudsters. This predictive capability allows companies to use their resources better and maybe even stop fraud before it occurs. Now, you might think with all this AI stuff, it's a perfect solution. But like any powerful technology, there are challenges and things to consider. One of the biggest is data privacy. Using AI to stop fraud requires access to sensitive financial information. Companies must ensure data protection while complying with privacy regulations. Another challenge is data quality. AI models are only as good as the data they learn from. If the data is bad, like incomplete or biased, it's like feeding the AI junk food. It won't work right. And then there's the black box problem. Sometimes it's hard to understand how an AI reaches its conclusions. Let's see how these AI tricks are being used out there in the real world to actually prevent fraud. American Express has been using deep learning since 2010 to check every transaction almost instantaneously, stopping fraudulent transactions before they show up on your statement. Capital One employs machine learning to identify unusual spending patterns that may indicate fraudulent activity. Globally, digital banks like Bunk are innovating with generative AI to create realistic fake data for better training their fraud detection models. Meanwhile, BNY Mellon uses advanced computing power to analyze vast amounts of financial data for money laundering detection. To protect yourself from fraud in this digital world, it's essential to stay informed about the various types of fraud and be cautious with the personal information you share online. Regularly checking your bank statements for unfamiliar transactions can help catch any discrepancies early. When shopping online, ensure that the sites are secure by looking for HTTPS in the URL. Additionally, using strong passwords and enabling two-factor authentication adds an extra layer of security to your accounts. As we embrace advancements in AI technology for fraud prevention, we must remain vigilant about privacy regulations and strive for transparency in decision-making processes to build trust and accountability in financial systems.